All right. Hey, Lisa, would you mind kind of introducing the topic and doing introductions and so forth?
She is not connected audio yet, so she can't hear you, Brian.
So I take silence as consent.
Yeah.
Commit her to all sorts of things.
Well, that's dangerous to do at the bargain table, my friend. Okay, so while Lisa is struggling with her audio, I would like to do introductions then, but Lisa, I think, can focus on content. So we have with us today Dr. Kimberly Mateer and Loretta Benjamin Samuels. Dr. Mateer is our Senior Director of Professional Learning and Leadership, and Loretta Benjamin Samuels is our Senior Director of HR Strategic Partnerships. And so we have the experts in the room now. And Lisa, do you want to tee up what specifically we've asked them to come to talk about?
Yes, and I apologize for my technical difficulties. So as we mentioned this morning, we asked Kimberly and Loretta to join us to talk through our counters to Section 1 and Section 6 of the proposal for methods for attracting, supporting, and retaining educators of color. Like I shared this morning, this is an area of interest for the district. It's an area that Kimberly and Loretta do a lot of their work in, and so they were very excited to hear that there was that we were going to be talking about that work. And so I just want to, just going to kind of walk us through the document here. Draw our attention to the changes, and then I'll hand the mic over to them to explain. High level, you see a lot of strike through here. I want you to try not to panic. It's not that we agree that we want to be able to provide this kind of mentorship. We think that it fits best under our already established mentor program. And so that's why you will see that we cite to Article 21 here and add language in here referencing the ways that we can provide mentorship for educators of color. And there's a change here that Kimberly is going to explain to the language regarding selection, because once we move into providing mentorship in this area, we want to make sure that we're very carefully selecting the mentors who have training and are adequately prepared to provide this type of mentoring. Actually, before we scroll down, so Kimberly, I think that at this point, I'd like to go ahead and let you talk about how you envision this working in our mentor program.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I thank you for this opportunity to come and speak with you all about some of the work that we're doing in the mentoring program, specific to supporting our staff of color, our teachers of color. So we do have culturally specific mentoring supports that are in place, and what we are doing is working on enhancing. So I just wanted to share a little bit about what we've been doing this year. So structurally, we have, we're collecting a lot of data and logs about the experiences of our teachers of color. We are using an equity-based cycle of inquiry to really dig in and find out how to provide specific targeted support. So if there are racialized experiences that are happening, how do we specifically lean into those? We are doing significantly intensive professional learning around, creating a culture of anti-racism or anti-racist practices, and really evaluating culture and climate that our staff of color are working in, and then taking that data. So when we are finding incidences where there may be oppression or racist practices that are happening. We really lean in and we pull together teams. We do a lot of empathy interviews. Sometimes we put in safety plans because sometimes it comes from things that are happening in community or external factors that may be taking place. And so we work with principal supervisors, regional soups. We call together meetings. Sometimes we have to put safety plans in place to make sure that teachers are feeling safe and able to work. So it just depends. We're trying to really personalize the supports and that are contingent upon what they're experiencing. And we're collecting that data. We're looking at trends to see if there's patterns of experiences and things like that. So we're not just trying to provide surface level support just to say, oh, there's somebody else that looks like you that's here, but we're really trying to be very intentional in terms of understanding the experiences of staff of color in our system. In addition to that, we do have mentors of color. We're also trying to differentiate. So we have started doing small group mentoring as well as one-to-one mentoring. So you might think of that as affinity space. And it really, being able to buy both of those constructs, because sometimes you need a one-to-one, but then also when we find that there are feelings of isolation, we're pulling together small groups of mentors for staff of color together to do small group mentoring. And then we've extended those supports even beyond third year if necessary, to provide that small group mentoring if they're beyond their third year of a new teacher. In addition to that, we have, we're part of the McREN, which comes out of the Educator Advancement Council. That's where Multnomah and the Clackamas ESDs came together to form a regional network of educators. And we've been meeting for a little over a year now, planning regional supports, because this isn't just a concern in our district, but districts all across Multnomah County and Clackamas, and not necessarily having enough staff of color to provide these kinds of supports. So we are creating regional structures, regional systems that will work across both Multnomah and Clackamas schools, supporting staff of color through mentoring, professional learning, affinity space. And then we're also trying to make that structure, again, to be more strategic. So we have different tiers of support. So if you're just wanting that collegial support because of isolation, you have that kind of tier 1 support. But then if you're needing advocacy in some way, then we move up by tiers, tier 2, tier 3, where we can have advocacy support. And then tier 3, strategic support, and really working with districts to redefine systems of support internally. So, so with that regional support piece and the things that we're trying to do in-house, I think we're really trying to have a robust system. So if I just feel like it would be very difficult just to identify people across buildings and say you can be a mentor, because we really want to have the mentoring supports with intentionality, if that makes sense. So
sure.
Yeah, I have a question, I guess a question and a concern. So how many mentors of color are there in PPS, and of those, how many are Black?
So I believe we have, let's see, 1, 2, I think we have 5 mentors of color. I just met with the McREN, and because of this work that we're doing, they're actually going to fund another FTE. And so we're providing, like I said, culturally specific mentoring supports, and they're wanting to learn from some of the structures. So we're going to be able to add another mentor of color, so that I believe that will give us 5 or 6 mentors of color. We have 1 African American, but we're finding that's the case across many of our school districts, which is why we're putting in a regional strategy.
Yeah, I guess that my concern, thank you so much. I guess my concern would be a mentor from another school district or a mentor from somebody not specifically within PPS, not being able to give that specific support to how PPS functions or what types of scenarios an educator of color might come across.
Right. No, and actually they could be a PPS teacher going through the regional structure to get that funding and additional training and things like that.
I'm not very familiar with the mentor program as it is. How many people does a mentor generally support currently?
It can be anywhere between 10 to 15 for their caseload if they're full-time.
Thank you. And that's not a full-time educator, that's someone who's not currently working in a school, or is it?
That's a non-classroom position, so they're
Okay.
full-time mentor. Yes.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that presentation. I think that gives us some information. I did want to give just some context about this proposal itself. These proposals were developed from several dialogues with our educators of color, and the intent here is to do this in addition, right, to the mentorship program. I think what we heard a lot was there's a lot of value in having like a peer program where other educators of color could work with new educators of color during their probationary period in those first 3 years, having them understand not only the district but hopefully being able to have educators in the same building to understand, like down like at that level, like on the ground at the building level, what were the best practices, how to, address certain things that are, every building is different, right? Every situation is different. And so having that on the ground knowledge of how things work, and also just access and proximity, if we're utilizing folks that are, within the same peer network, there's a lot of value there. I really appreciate the mentor program that exists. I would actually love to learn more about your presentation. So if there's anything that you can send us on this, like documented, that would be great as well.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. And so, Dr. Materia, thanks so much for the presentation. Another question I have is, and I know we brought this up in a couple different contexts this year, but in Article 21, it talks about the mentor program being for professional educators, and we know that like this year, the district hired a lot of social workers, but there weren't any social worker mentors, and so if there were social workers of color who wanted a mentor of color, like they didn't get a mentor in the first place. And if they did get a mentor, or let's say, I believe there's been one counselor mentor some years. And if that one person isn't a person of color, how can the district guarantee a mentor of color for any educator who requests one, when in some cases there's only one mentor in that job type, like there's only one choice?
Yes, so that's why we are trying to differentiate the needs. Sometimes it isn't a one-to-one that's needed. That's why we moved to the small group mentoring, which we have found that people were excited about. So we're really trying to base it on a needs by needs basis. What we've done is I talked with some of our mentors of color, because the data collection that we're doing is really telling us. I like to be very strategic in terms of how we utilize our resources, because they shift every year. We have, like you said, restricted resources. And also what I find is that it's what people are needing are a little bit more than just learning about their job, or, you know, when it's
Right.
a person of color, it's about navigating right the
Yes.
systems and practices and things that may be harmful to them as a person of color. And that requires a lot of training, background, skill, and we are working on building toolkits and professional development supports for that. I think the reason why I'm trying to emphasize this regional network, it's not that we can't do this peer coaching idea, but to have them go through the region to be identified, even if it's a PPS educator, if we need to expand beyond what we have now, that allows for us to get additional funding and support, right? Along with the training, and then making sure that all of our persons who serve as a mentor actually have the knowledge and the skills to really support in ways that that help the mentor, or they help the new educator, if that makes sense. So I think that's why we're trying to use this regional structure right now, and then and see about how that expansion goes once we have a better sense. We haven't, I have not heard of anyone that hasn't, who has requested one that has been denied. We are prioritizing our staff of color in terms of making sure that they have somebody to support them. In addition, even in our new leader side, when I found out that someone didn't have someone and our caseloads were full, we recruited an additional person. But now we have a regional structure that can help provide those resources as well as identify people.
Can I just add also that the new thing about this is, if you've been here for a while, you will recognize that we have not always had an abundance of counselors, social workers, school psychs that are people of color, right? So so we have to take that into consideration, and we have been thinking about that, because I think we will continue to be very intentional about having more representation of our student body. And so as we think about our mentoring and who we're offering it to, we are thinking about those other employee PAT bargaining unit. And as we started this out, we were really focusing on the classroom teacher, because at that point in time of our thinking, they had the most direct contact with students. But we've learning that as we change our systems, that is not the case anymore. And as we're learning that we're able to actually hire people who represent the student body, that is no longer the case anymore. So we've been toying with that idea as well. And we're trying to get the most beneficial information to our employees the best way that we can. And so that's what the regional piece does for us. And I think we want to clarify that the regional piece will and can have PPS employees helping PPS employees.
Yes. And if you recall, some of the reasons why we lost some of that mentoring support was because ODE funded, they had specific funds for mentoring.
Yeah.
And that was taken away after my first year coming back to PPS. And I was livid. And it wasn't. And so when they started talking about these regional networks, I was very critical, because I thought, you're taking away the support so that we, so I was very upset and very vocal about it. But since I've been involved, I really see now what they're trying to do. So I've been spending hours upon hours. I'm on the design team, on the coordinating body, and I am just so excited about the work that is being done with this network. Where I was very critical in the beginning, I'm starting to get excited, because I think this regional support actually will give more strength to the type of mentoring that we want to do, because this isn't just a PPS challenge. This is a larger challenge, and I think we can put pressure in a way from a regional structure that we can't do as a single entity. And when I say pressure, I mean pressure to change, to really create the type of transformation that we need in our system.
Sorry, I think already clarified this, but I'm Dr. Mateer, your statement that nobody's been denied or turned away from a mentorship, were you speaking just about gen ed teachers? Because that's one of the things that's actually come up in contract administration quite a few times, is the lack of access to a mentor of some of our social workers and counselors that have wanted that mentorship.
Yes, but no, so I'm not talking, we lost the funding for, and so that's why we don't have the extended groups right now. But now that I'm learning about how, that's why I was saying I was like upset, right, about the loss. So now that I'm understanding, so I went and I try to lean in and learn more about how the EAC RENs work. And now that I see how this is going to work, I think I can leverage that structure in a way that actually will give us better breadth of support than if we were to try to do this on our own.
Okay. I think the piece that it obviously sounds, I mean, you guys are doing a lot of work. I think one of the things that I'm wondering is, like, all of our language was stricken, and this language came like directly from a lot of intense work and discussions with our educators of color, who are saying this is a need, like this is a need beyond like a professional mentorship, like those pieces that you spoke about being an educator of color in PPS, like this, they felt like this was a critical need. And so to listen to the work you're doing, but then to also simultaneously see all of our language stricken is
I guess what I'm saying, it's embedded within, right? So it's embedded within our current structures. So there's nothing that's going to prohibit us. So as the needs come into the system and they're identified, then we will work to provide the mentoring supports that are needed. My concern is that we're not just randomly identifying people just because they say, oh, I want to be a mentor. What we have found is that hasn't been the proper support to necessarily to help the people of color to be successful. There is a deeper depth. We did empathy interviews, where there's quite a bit of data that was collected from the REN. So these same narratives, that's why we try to, create differentiated tiers of support. Knowing who really wants just an affinity space for that kind of technical, logistical navigation of their school environment versus I need advocacy versus we really need system redesign help because, like this isn't working type thing. Being able to be responsive at all levels, navigating your peers. So I'll give a student example, and I'm going to then translate that. This is what adults feel. One of our principals was talking, they were doing an observation, and there was the teacher who was giving a task to the students. It was an IB class. And there, in one of the small group breakouts, there was one student of color, and then the majority of the students in the small group were white. And they were supposed to share about a text, a narrative that was related to something that they were learning. All of the white students who shared, they had shared experiences around that text. The person of color did not. And then when it was the person of color's chance to share, they shared a different text. And then the white students were like, I don't know what that is. And then because they couldn't make that connection with the student of color's example, they literally began to marginalize and alienate. And I'm not saying it was done on purpose, but then that student of color disengaged, right? So those type of experiences are happening with adults as well. And there is a set, it's not just, oh, let me console you type of mentoring that's needed. It is, how do we create the conditions, right, for positive engagement and interaction? Again, this idea of navigating your space in a way that is going to help you be an effective educator, not only for your students, but to develop strong relationships with your colleagues. That's the type of development that we want our mentors, whether they're peer, whether they're centralized, to have. And so I think going through this regional structure allows for us to be able to pay for them to get the training and the support that they need. They will also have a network of other mentors that they can work with, so that we're giving comprehensive wraparounds and not just identifying and calling someone a mentor without giving them that background knowledge and training.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. McCure. I'm sorry. I just wanted to just thank you again for this information. And I think that there's so much that we can agree upon, right?
Yeah.
In terms of need.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to just point out again that our proposal, we were very we did a lot of work about making sure that our language did not say mentor, right? So our proposal is for an educator of color peer support program.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that we're actually not we're not competing for ideas. I think that what we're doing is we're proposing something that augments what you're doing, and I'd love to be I'd love to kind of collaborate and coordinate so that we're not doing the same thing, right? Or that we're not proposing the same thing, but really we're trying to be like an additional support.
Absolutely. And I think I totally agree with that. I'm saying that that type of differentiated support can exist within our current structure. And I'd be more than happy, to design within the structures and then talk about, how to make that work with you all.
One of my concerns, I guess, and again, I'm not completely familiar with the mentor program, but just in having it all exist within the mentor program as opposed to an additional peer support would be the frequency and availability of the mentor to meet the needs of the newly hired educator of color. I'm not sure how often mentors meet with the people that they work with or are available, how many hours they give per month or what. But I guess what I liked about the peer support was it was separated and solely concerned with these kind of navigational pieces, and as opposed to not lumping, because lumping implies not being intentional, but just having it exist with the how to navigate becoming a teacher and what to do in your classroom. And so I guess it appeals that separating it seems like you can meet both needs better than having it together.
No, absolutely. I guess maybe I'm not clear. And so maybe the next time we could look structurally when I'm talking about, when I say differentiated mentoring supports, when we talk about tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So yes, so that kind of tier 1, just, providing that navigation and that logistical kind of support. Absolutely. I'm not negating the peer support at all. I'm saying that exists within our current structure as well.
And I guess that's the piece that I'm concerned about, and I think maybe other members on our team are concerned about, is we are hearing from our educators of color that they're not experiencing that support. And so if it's embedded in, like, how are they accessing it? And in the process of it being created, or in the process of not knowing how to access it, what's happening is then other educators of color are stepping up and doing this work and supporting their peers and supporting their colleagues, and then that's creating more of a work put onto to other educators of color. And that's kind of the loop right now, that we want to be able to have a clear system and an easy way to access that support, so that we're not having people step up and fill that role because it's not accessible.
Yes, no, I definitely understand that. So I think we're in the, let me backtrack. That hasn't been something that has always existed. So once we started collecting data around needs, we knew that we needed to differentiate supports. And this is something that we have been engaging in regional discussions about all of these things that you're talking about and having a regional plan, because a lot of those dollars that were that we lost from ODE has been redistributed through the regional network. So in order for us to access that funding and support, we need to go through the regional structure in order to be able to do the kinds of things that you're talking about, because those are where the dollars are at. But I'm more than happy to, continue to work on this with you, but I do think that this type of support that you're talking about is a part of what we're designing. And in terms of communicating, we're redesigning the application process. I'm going to be building it into the new educator orientation so that people are really aware and trying to figure out how do we maximize, because the thing that I want to really stress, I'm speaking from my lived experiences as an educator of color in Portland Public Schools, and all of our educator mentors are mentors of color. We're all speaking from our lived experiences. And so when we're designing with those experiences in mind. And we have a wide variety of experiences that we're using as lenses, as well as the data that we're collecting from the educators of color that we work with, both from a local and regional perspective. So I think it's the intentionality that we're really trying to design comprehensive supports, because this is near and dear to our hearts. We're really doing this with a passion and a mission. We are mission focused. We cry many tears to make sure that we get this right.
That's great. You said there's one African-American mentor of color in PPS, and then are there more available within the regional program that you guys are talking about?
Yes, there are across, and that I think that was one of the reasons why this regional structure was important, because there are not as many, and that was a way to build a critical mass. So that even, because the part of when you're providing peer support or mentoring support, it takes a toll on you as well, because you develop these deep relationships with people, and so you're walking alongside with them. So they need that support as well. So this is about supporting the peer mentors that are offering that peer support, and then your full-time mentors also having a place where they can come together and talk about strategies and ideas, and again, get that training. So we're trying to create this network of support so that we can eliminate the feelings of isolation and marginalization that happen at all levels of the system.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, I think that really hits what our shared interest is, right? Is eliminating that sense of isolation.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's a way to put it, one of our interests, of course, is to have in our contract something that we can point to and make sure that we can stand behind with our newly hired educators of color to say, like, this is a support for you, and we're going to make sure you can get it and access it, and our building reps know how to help support new members of color in their building to get that support. And so I wonder, with what you're describing being available, is there something that you could, I guess this is to the PPS bargaining team, like, is there something, right now there's a lot of cross outs, but is there something that you would add into the contract to be able to point to say, we newly hired educators of color may access a peer support network? I guess it's not clear from so this says it's intended to, but and I guess that would be another question is, are you saying that a newly hired educator in PPS, regardless of what their job description is, will have access to a mentor of color if they ask for it?
Yes, I think if it's, it may not be the 1-to-1 and the 90 hours, because again, we're trying to differentiate. So we have to look at what the requests are that come in. it may not be the 90 hours. So that's why we would look at that. And I think we could work with you, Elizabeth, and your group or team to really clarify these supports that are there, and then work with you to, I mean, I would love to work in partnership with you to communicate these supports so that people are aware and know about them, and then really, you know, stay in close contact around making sure that we're hitting our targets, that we are meeting needs, because, you know, this is something that we can't do on our own, right? So this is why the regional network's important. I would love to have a partnership with you all in terms of communicating. We could even do quarterly reports of what we're finding, you know, and then doing problem-based consultancies around that to see how we mitigate against those, and then access those funds from the EAC, because we now have this strong partnership. We can go to them and say, please fund this, blah, 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 blah. This is what we're trying to do, so forth and so on. But there's a lot of need out there. There is a lot of need, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm concerned about getting more and more specific, because we don't really have the full breadth of understanding around the needs of our system. We're kind of taking in some anecdotal information, but what I'm trying to do is create profiles of experiences to have targeted and specific supports to make sure that we can retain our educators of color and then not have all of these issues of isolation and marginalization.
Mhm.
So it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, is you all are asking about peer support, and we are saying that we think that can be captured under our mentoring program. So I'm wondering, like, exactly what you're talking about when you say peer support. Like, let's be clear about it, because we may have different definitions of that. And also want to make sure that, you know, years ago we had like 2 mentoring programs, one that was coming out of PAT, one was coming out of district, caused confusion. So we don't want to cause confusion for our educators as well, right? So we want to make sure that we all in this space can really articulate when someone asks us what we're talking about, like, what is it when we say peer support? Because I think we have some of that covered in the mentoring. So if you can give us a little more details, so I can think a little differently about it, I think that'll help me.
I mean, sure. One starting point is that the concept for the peer support that we're proposing is that it is separate and distinct from the mentor program. The mentors are doing an amazing job. They're working as hard as they can, and they're carrying a really full load. And the work that that department does is fantastic. But from the educators of color who met to describe their experiences with it, it's clear that there is an element that is not being met. And that is, it's not for me to characterize, but in general sense, how do I manage being part of Portland, not just Portland Public Schools?
Yeah.
How do I work in this culture? How do I fit?
Exactly.
How do I, when I am isolated in my building, how do I function and not feel as though this is not a place for me? And that's what the peer is meant to do. It's hard to be a mentor and spend your entire time focusing on professional practice and the support of a particular skill set, and at the same time meet the social and I suppose, for want of a better term, emotional needs of the colleagues in the building, because you are seeing them once every, whatever the pattern is, once every 2 weeks, once a week for a brief period of time. We're looking for a more intensive, continuous, and not simply, I am here to focus on your, it's not all about your practice. I'm not here to make your lesson plans better. I'm here to help you be part of Portland. I mean, it's, again, it's not for me to characterize, but We are looking to support, to work. We actually see this as fun. You know, we tried to write the language in such a way, we did not want it to be just sort of some ad hoc situation of volunteers stepping up and saying, hey, this is, I want to do this. We specifically put into the proposal that we wanted the district to work on training and developing a uniform set of expectations, and, you know, not having it be a 5-second check-in, but a real live, structured and purposeful support network.
Right.
And we don't see this as in any way limiting or in some way taking away from the amazing work that you're already doing.
Right.
We view this as meeting a different need that the educators have been very clear is not being met, not for want of trying, just because it's not been something that the district has been able to manage to do, probably because of how big the task is of supporting professional practice as the primary purpose. So
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because when we talk about change in culture and getting adjusted to culture, educators of color can't do that by themselves. It really takes the majority, which is the white staff, to help support that. And so maybe there's another way we can think about that as well, because data tells us that, right? Research tells us that. And so I just want to think about putting that burden on educators of color who's already stressed out to do their job already. So maybe there's another way we can figure all that out. But I totally get what you're saying, right? How we make people feel like they're welcome in this space. And we're talking about people of color, we're asking them to be welcome into a white space. And so it takes more than just us in this room, virtual room, to do that. So I think we need to have more conversation about that, because I want whatever we do to be meaningful, right? And I am speaking from a person who was the only Black person working in a school in Vermont, and I know how that was. But I also know that my white colleagues there welcomed me. And so we have to figure out how to do that, right? And we all have a responsibility for that. And so I think we need to think about that a little bit. So I kind of get what you all are saying now. That's why I was asking for examples when you say peer, because that has so many ways of determining what the table. And so
and I would love to sit down with you all and show you the things that we're designing and putting into place to really get at some of these things that you're talking about, and work in partnership with you to make sure that that these elements, because I'm very committed, very, very, very committed. And, you know, we want we're building this into our strategic plan, System Shift C. We're talking about how do we have accountability along with this, because it's easy just to throw dollars and structures and then we never necessarily see things change, right? And we want transformation. We want to redesign the system in a way that's going to work for everybody and be long lasting. And so that intentionality is so important. And so I would just love to, share with you some of the things that we're learning, and again, work in partnership with you. I think we definitely have shared goals here. And then because we are using evidence-based practices, so we're collecting data to make sure that the things that we are putting in place are going to have a meaningful impact, that we can, continuously work at that and make sure that we are hitting our targets, but also really calling back on the state to say, look, you took these supports away and we need them back. And this is how we're going to access them. I do think we can do that through the EAC now that I better understand what they're doing and how they're trying to do it. So I'm going to put that on the table and hope that we can work in collaboration around this.
I think that sounds like a really great idea. And we have our racial equity committee that has informed much of what we have proposed in this entire package. And John, I don't know what your thoughts are, but if you all are open to some near future meeting with a representative group from our racial equity committee, where some frank conversation can take place, and some workshopping and some problem solving and information exchange.
Yeah.
I think everyone would benefit from that.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I would love that.
Yes, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I
We have
mean,
been
just to,
meeting. Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Loretta.
That's awesome. And we have been meeting with a group of PAT members of color who's been talking about some of these issues, but we do want to be in collaboration and working with this, because standing alone is not good for them either, because they need to know that we are supporting them totally, right? And the support comes
Right.
from
Sure.
the district and from the union. So yes, Steve, we are all for that.
And just so, we sort of summarize this in a different meeting, but just so everybody here gets it, this came out of these members of that committee and members from around the state. You talked about the Regional Educator Network. In essence, they're the same type of structure, put together some of the ideas. They were brought specifically to the Portland committee. Portland committee worked on the ideas, gave them to the bargaining team. The bargaining team gave a shot at turning it into contract language. And we gave it back and said, this is our version of what you said, but it's, again, it's not for us to say. Please edit this language and make it say what you want. And so this is specifically from educators of color in Portland Public School expressing their need. It's not our version of it.
Right.
It's what they have said they need to be successful in the district.
Yeah.
And it's not, again, I need to be clear, this is not meant in any sort of criticism of any program that PPS has been part of. And we want, like you said, Laura, to be part of a collaborative approach on this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the idea of bringing some of I mean, it was a group that helped write this, but for want of a better term, the authors of the language coming in for a conversation would probably be a good idea.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely committed to the goals and willing to do whatever it takes to make sure we meet these goals. So you have that from me. I think too, one of the challenges that I think Loretta and I have, this being a new department, even though I know the mentoring program has been around for a long time, this department is new. And so we're trying to align to this continuum of support that the EAC put together. And so the problem is that nobody knows about it. So I think, if we could partner together, then we could see actually where the holes are and work to close them in whatever is necessary to do that. So I'm definitely committed, and I will fight and advocate right alongside with you.
So I think I have a process question. I think we're on the same page. So Lisa, we have a first draft of our proposed language here. Is there any room for us to, the PPS team, to go back and look at this and just review it again? Because we have a little different information now. I don't really know, and I'm not. I don't know. Do we get to do that again, or this is it? I'm asking for process.
We can always take a look at it again. I think I just wanted to reflect on having listened to this conversation. I hear John. I hear you reiterating again the source of the requests, and I found myself asking myself, why is John reiterating that again? And I'm guessing it's because you feel like our response is in some ways a no. And that's why you're reiterating this is where it came from.
Oh, and no, thank you, Lisa. No, that's not, but I understand why.
Yeah, I just want to make sure because I hear you all talking about how there's a need that feels that you're hearing is not being met. And I want to make sure that we're acknowledging that Kimberly is saying this is a plan that we haven't fully rolled out. And so I think both those things can be happening at the same time. She's talking about starting a new way of doing this program. And that's, I don't know, I just wanted to draw attention to that.
I do. And it's not, although I see what you're saying, and probably, Yeah, maybe because it seems like a no, and I know, but as the conversation progresses, I can feel that it's not a no, and I get that loud and clear. The reason why I was stressing it was because we were trying to make clear that it was an idea and a concept that had been brought to us to be separate and distinct from the mentor program. Not that it wouldn't be, you know, even the same administrative staff overseeing this peer support program. We don't, that's not our intent. We don't care. But that a set of individuals be trained, you know, selected and trained after they volunteer, right? We don't want anybody assigned to it, but selected and trained after they volunteer to be able to meet some of these needs, we felt was a, you know, of all the ideas that were going around, we thought that this was one that was extremely important. And so did our members. So that's the reason why I reiterated was not because of the, I mean, it's been a very fruitful conversation, but I just really wanted to keep stressing that this is coming because the desire was to be something other than mentorship. So.
And I do want to just clarify, because the mentorship is not just helping with lesson planning. So you can see our logs. It can be about.
Oh yeah, no, I know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I gave it as, I'm sorry, and you're right. I don't mean to cut you off, but that was just a loose example I threw.
Okay, alrighty.
Yeah, I hear you. Yes, absolutely.
And then in the meantime, I mean, anything that you can share about how the mentor, the you know, the existing mentor program is shifting, it'd be great for us to know and understand.
Yes.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing anything you can.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And then also because we are being live streamed, and for people who don't look at the contract in as much depth as we do every day, the mentor program does have a compensation structure spelled out already for it. So, you know, striking out that portion of your language is not an intent to say, and this work is not compensated. It's right. To roll it into that program.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't think, well, I'm speaking only for myself now. I didn't take it that way, but the clarification is helpful.
Okay, well then I think I'd like to scroll down and let Loretta talk about our response in what in your proposal is section 6 and what on this document we're looking at right now is section 3. Loretta, would you like to talk about that?
Well, first, I want to say with great appreciation, the thought about growing our own and increasing the diversity amongst the educators here in PPS. There's really no need to create because we already have this program in place. We're in the process of enhancing. Not really sure how much you all know about the programs that we have in place and how these programs, Grow Your Own programs under our Career Ladders umbrellas. This new concept is part of our System C shift work due to the results of the vision language that we have, and it's about developing all our employees and finding opportunities. So you may be familiar with one of the oldest programs that we have, the Supporting Teachers program. You may have heard that it went out and no longer exists, but that is not what happened. There was a change in the supervision of the program. The person who was in charge retired, and we had to figure out how to replace this person. COVID happened, so you had a whole bunch of time and space. So it sent a whole bunch of crazy messages out to folks. But now we are in the process of moving forward with that program. And it's been in existence for more than 30 years. And so we have been able to be richly benefiting from the educators that's from that program. And so creating, I don't think we need, enhancement we do. And a couple of things we've done to enhance. One is we have great EAs and para-educators in our system who are great in the classroom. So we created an EA para to teacher program to help support as well. This program has been really focusing on EAs and parents of color who have been interested in becoming a teacher. And so they're able to do that with a university partner that we have. And they're able to do this while they're working because of the way the courses and things are offered to them. I'm also excited to say that we partnered this year with the athletics department. Marshall Haskin came up with this brainchild of an idea to have coach to teacher program where we have coaches who have athletic coaches, I should say, who I think are members of the PAT bargaining group. And we found that there was a huge number of interests. And so we started to see how we could make that work. So we had this coach to teacher program, very excited about that with a partner, university partner as well. This program is designed to really focus on Black and Native educators to be. And so we have, I think, 7 Black African-American men and a Native woman. So we're very proud of them. And this is their first semester of taking courses here. So I think one thing I want to talk about is that, yes, we need more collaboration between us and you in helping these programs be successful. Again, you know, these will be members to you. They still need support. I also want to talk about that you have put in I think some language around compensation after or supporting the cohort member while they're in these programs. Well, I know for the PTP program, they are able to go to PCC with no cost to them. They transfer over to PSU with no cost to them, and they're able to graduate, you know, without that kind of expense. And I can't say the same for the other 2 programs at this point in time. You know, one of the reasons for this is there's a capacity with the cost, and we can't really figure that out yet. But these folks who are in the program have been able to figure out how to get in the program. And the Oregon Department of Education currently, and we're hoping they can sustain this, is offering a $5,000 scholarship to educators of color. I'm going to call them educators because I'm assuming they're going to finish, right? So future educators, right, of color and linguistic background, and that's a $5,000 scholarship on an annual basis. So of course we encourage our employees to take advantage. I'm calling them employees already. They haven't gotten there yet, but I look at them that way, to take advantage of that, right? And of course, you know, we do whatever we can possibly do to support licensure, helping them understand that process. We try to do whatever we possibly can, especially folks in our Grow Your Own program, to make it as easy of a transition when they leave the university to the school district.
Loretta, I just want to also add that with the PTP, we've added a special ed pathway as well. So traditionally, it just had the general ed pathway, but there's also a SPED pathway now.
Mm-hmm. And you all know how important it is because we all have been in situations that it has been asked of us. So where are the special educators of color? And we say we're trying our best to get them. So having this component is going to help us enhance that number of for special ed, I think, as well. So I just think that for the Grow Your Own program, I think that some of it is in its infancy stage. We are always open to think about other ways. We've also been asked about having the Grow Your Own program for counselors. And so that's another, you know, component that we're thinking about. And we have not been asked about any other particular subject matter, but we know that there are more. And I want to share with you something I think is exciting, is that we partner with the CTE department to talk to high school students in particular, and they're working on middle school students as well, but high school students to get them interested in the educator career track for CTE. And so we have been focusing on that group. And what the hope is we can get that group to get some preliminary work about understanding what it is about being an educator by having a program they can go from high school to PCC or maybe another school, Warner Pacific or something like that, and help them get on that track immediately instead of, you know, going away. One thing we want to do is when we do these Grow Your Own programs, we want to focus on, you know, how do we get our students who are alums to come back and be educators? That's one. How do we put in place the opportunity, like hands-on type experience for our students who are in CTE to understand what the future could look like for them. And Kimberly, do you want to give them a little bit about the symposium that we have coming up, so they'll give them an idea, an example what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. So we are partnering with Multnomah Education Service District to create this high school academy, and it's called Rising Educators Academy, and it really is to serve as an entry point into the field of education, and really trying to also serve as the recruitment arm to our PTP program, both for the SPED pathway and our general ed pathway. And we are we're also designing a learning hub at Fabian, which will allow us to set up a lot of demonstration classrooms and really get some rich preparatory experiences for the high school students. The symposium is going to be focused on creating the future of education, and so they'll be engaged in innovative design and what the future of education might look like. And then we'll be creating these networked improvement communities with high school students, not just our high school students, but high school students across districts. Well, they'll come together twice a year to design what they want their education to look like, to really support our PPS Reimagine. And so we'll be looking at, we'll have a futurist speaker who will talk about the trends that they will have to navigate when they become an adult and exit the school system. And so what's the type of learning that we want to be preparing for now to help them to be prepared for their future. So it'll be really exciting and engaging. And so we're looking forward to that. It'll be an annual event, but the high school academy will be an ongoing partnership with our CTE program.
Thank you. I also want to say how much we appreciate the collaboration we've had with the letter of intent process. And you will see in the language we are asking for members of our Grow Your Own program to have some consideration so we can get them into employment. And so that's why we put that there, and not to belittle or dismiss the letter of intent project that we have going on, but also to figure out a way how we can consider graduates from these Grow Your Own programs. And we know we have contractual language that could impede that. And so we want you to take that in consideration. The other thing I wanted us to share out with you is that, at one point in time, Portland Public School had maybe 53 schools that was considered labeled Title I. And so we still support the loan forgiveness. We manage that with the educators when they're asking for support for that. So that will never go away as long as the federal government has it available to us all. And we encourage them. We actually even talk about it in the new educator orientation, because we want people to know that that's an option for them.
So may I ask, Loretta, thank you for bringing that up, because that was something that when I was reading it, I initially thought when I was reading this that the Grow Your Own initiative shall be considered as, I was wondering why you didn't want to, or why the district didn't want to make it shall be considered or shall receive a letter of intent. And the reason I say that is because if the individual is considered an internal candidate under our contract, I know you're saying you don't want to bar them from getting hired. We don't either. But if they're hired an internal candidate, it could potentially trigger a loss of a position somewhere. In other words, the whole idea of the internal round is everybody who's actually here gets a position. Oh, there's also the letter of intent. So the letter of intent people are guaranteed a position, but they're guaranteed a position after we put everybody who's already here where they go. Letters of intent are sort of internal, external, so to speak. Do you know what I mean? They're sort of straddling, they live in both worlds in a little bit. Would the district be open to using that process?
Listen, John, we are not going to say no to a process and get us to get out, Grow Your Own folks hired. Let's say
Well,
that
that's what I'm
clearly,
saying. Like,
right?
I want that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just automatically assume that they will get a letter of intent, but we can go back and look at that language and make it a little stronger here so that we really identify that they will get a letter of intent and be part of that process as well.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thank you for that little
Thank
tip.
you. No. I'm just like, I was like, oh, because it would be
Yes.
tough to do. We want exactly the same thing, which is guarantee that our grow your own are in fact hired. That's
Yes.
the goal.
Yes.
So.
Okay. So do you guys have any questions that I could try to answer?
It may
I
be a
certainly
big
don't.
question, but I'm not familiar with the PTP, the Portland Teacher Program. Is there any way you can give like a brief overview of what that is?
So the Portland Teacher Program started back over 30 years ago, and it was designed to help Portland Public Schools diversify their teacher workforce. And the original director, she was working over at PSU, and she was working with students from, first generation college students. And she saw a need. I think she created this proposal, and we've been working on it since that time. And we are PPS, PCC, and Portland State University. And in the most recent years, Beaverton School District has joined us. And so the school districts, right, actually support this program with the idea that once they finish, that we will do our best to help them seek employment within our district. The students do their student teaching in our program. Anytime we have people do student teaching in our program, we look at them as future employees because they're getting their training. We are their training ground. And so this program has been very beneficial to us. We have so many educators of color have gone through this program. Many of them still work for us. Many of them have gone on and have bigger, different kind of jobs, so we're very proud of the program, and it's still in its existence. So the program has helped us diversify our educated workforce.
And I'm an alum, so I'm an example of that.
Yes, Kimberly is an example. Kimberly, from teacher to assistant principal. Oh my gosh, Kimberly, you've gone away, been assistant soup someplace else. She's back here with us. So yeah, so it works. Right, gives people the opportunity.
That there is no cost at PCC and PSU for those candidates. So is it a scholarship? Is it?
Yes.
Okay, it's a scholarship. Okay.
Yes.
Is that still actually? I'm sorry. I understood that the PTP program did not cover full tuition anymore.
Full tuition for your bachelor's. Full tuition for your bachelor's, and that's enough for our SPED educators to become an employee. And then it's 50% for your master's degree.
Okay, and so, so prior, was it full tuition waivers for master's as well?
So when I went through, it wasn't a guarantee. It was if there was extra money left over. Mm-hmm. And so I know that I was fortunate enough to have that. My understanding when I was going through, and obviously I'm a little bit older now, I won't tell you my age, but so it's varied over the course of the years. But I know that with adding this additional SPED pathway, they can only do the 50% for the master's.
Yeah, no, so some of our members have come through that program. So I know that that it has had value in the past. Mm-hmm. And I'll also say that some of the changes to that program have kind of inspired some of these proposals, right? So our members who have actually come through that program have been critical of the changes that have been happening there. Mm-hmm. I would like to say that I am not being critical of that program. I think it's an important one, but it is also something that, like, this proposal itself is being shaped by some of our members who have come through that.
Yeah.
And I think that this is actually yet another situation where I feel like I like your proposal. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself. I like parts of it. I also like parts of ours, and in these types of situations, I don't know that we should be talking about either or. I think that sometimes it's just appropriate to talk about both and, right? So I don't know that our proposal is exclusive to yours, right? Kind of similar to the previous proposal. This was shaped by like John has said, like, I've tried to play a role and help facilitate, our members who are educators of color to like be able to bring these proposals forward, as have all of our staff and everybody here on our bargaining team. I think it goes without saying that, many of our educators of color come from backgrounds where they had to take a lot of student loans out, right? Or they didn't have the resources that other educators have had to be able to get their education. And so this is a direct financial assistance for our members who are coming to PPS with a great deal of financial burden. So I know that there are programs that exist to help them. I think that we're obviously committed to proposing things that incentivize more educators of color to come here. I think earlier today, Elizabeth shared a document with us that by my math, I see that 43% of the students at PPS are students of color, yet 21% of teachers are students of color, right? I think we're all on the same page that we would love to see that kind of like more equalized, right? So I think that it's time for us to talk about both and because we're not there yet. We're on a journey towards that. So and I don't think that we're disagreeing a lot here, right? I think we have a lot to agree on. So I want to thank you for this information, but I want to just encourage that, hey, if we're going to talk about that, let's talk about both.
Yeah, I know that in committee, there's also talk about trying to get state funding for this, for these bodies of work, and so that it can be sustainable. As you know, I don't want us to get into a situation where we have to do layoffs and other things because we keep losing funding for this or for that. We need a stable funding structure. And I think the state, could help with that. And so we should hopefully campaign or have some kind of campaign for some state funding.
Dr. Mateer, I completely agree that we should be working together and across the state, because this is not just, supporting students of color to become educators of color, I know is an initiative around the state. And the wealth gap in our culture and society is real, and paying off people's student loans allows them to become homeowners, to get roots in communities, to raise families, and stick around. And I wonder, if you share the goal of supporting our students who are already rooted in this community, or students of color who love, who have those connections to become educators. I think that's kind of what our vision here is. And it's a slow process, right? It's going to take a long time to get there, but you talked about sustainability. And I think that's really at the root of this, is how do we don't want to bring people in, burn them out, and then replace them, right? We want to create that sustainable culture. And so I wonder if there's a way to, and I also agree with what Musa said, do both of these things. I think that what you proposed seems, to speak for myself, a great thing to add into it. But I wonder how else we could think about supporting our students within our community, and incentivizing them and supporting them and making a viable path for them to come back to us as certified educators, and maybe write into the plan how to take advantage of funding that exists, and to bridge the gap if those other things aren't there. And of course, like not all of our educators of color work at Title I schools. None of our high schools are Title I schools. So they're, you know,
Right.
in those federal programs, I hope it isn't like this anymore, but in the last 4 years, we're very difficult to access. And I think I heard at one point something like 90% of people who qualified for loan forgiveness did not receive loan forgiveness.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the continuing conversation about and how we can build this in. And of course, it matches our support in our school district for CTE tracks, and we have the personnel to do all kinds of CTE work with folks in the field of education to share that knowledge and expertise, and educators of color, particularly, to share that knowledge and expertise.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because yesterday we were in this conversation talking about exactly about that. How do we capture our alums who've gone someplace else and are certified and come back here and work in Portland? And how do we still connect with alums who graduated from our schools who are interested in becoming teachers or educators? Our counselors, another big one, and they just don't know how to do it. So that is one of the items that we discussed yesterday in a different meeting. So I'm glad we're on the same page with that.
I didn't stop share to stop the conversation. I just grow tired of not seeing anyone's face. And I just wanted to feel like I was part of the group again. But please keep talking if there are any additional questions about that.
I was just wondering real quick, Ms. Benjamin Samuels, how many people have gone through the EA Para to Teacher and Coach to Teacher track or completed it?
The EA to Teacher program started, I want to say 2 years ago, because our first cohort had just finished up. They just finished their student teaching, and they will be applying for jobs. And the second cohort just started, right? And the Coach to Teacher, they are in their first cohort of students, but we already got an application out and getting ready for the second cohort, right? And same thing with the EA to Para. So we try to keep at least 8 to 10 going constantly in the program. And so we're very excited that we're actually going to have some graduates this year.
Yeah, our first cohort was 100% educators of color. So we're excited.
That is fantastic. Well, I mean, obviously, I think two things came out of this for me. One is that obviously I expected this, that the district and the association are on the same track with these goals. And two, that we should probably have either we need to have additional and or separate meetings where we come together to discuss these. And I'm really glad the suggestion came that the district, just as we're going to examine our proposal and see if we can find middle ground between the two or blending the two together, the idea that you know, your team would spend some time re-examining the our proposals, I guess, to see what could be done. I think it's fantastic. So I don't have additional questions on it, but I just am happy the way this went.
Well, thank
It was
you.
nice to meet you all.
Yes, and it's good to see my colleagues, Steve and John and Elizabeth, and the others from the PAT group. It's nice to meet you all, and hopefully we'll get to talk some more. I'm very interested in what you have to say, especially around the work that we're doing. And we don't want your voice to be silent, just like we don't want our educators of color voices to be silent, and we want them to be heard very loud. So thank you for this time. I think we had great dialogue, and I hope we can continue this dialogue, because without you, some of this work that we are doing will be complicated, and we don't want it to be complicated. So Brian, thanks for inviting Kimberly and I, Dr. Mattia, and Sharon and Lisa. We'll see you later. Hi, Danny.
Thank
Hi,
you, guys.
It is great to see you again. It really is.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Bye-bye.
All right. So I vote we keep with the pattern. Sharon, would you like to introduce our next guest speaker while I get my screen back up for sharing?
I'm happy.
I'm sorry, Sharon, if it's all right, I would ask for about a 5-minute break possibly for everyone involved here. And I don't need to log out, but maybe if we just had a brief break, that'd be fantastic.
I can't deny that, John.
Oh,
let's
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank God we all get to be here then. Thank you for reminding us.
Okay, so it's 3:40, let's say 3:45.